Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Kamla Ganesh, formerly from the Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai, currently Senior Fellow of the Indian Council of Social Science Research. We are now going to discuss the module Transnationalism and the Indian Middle Class as part of the course on Sociology of the Indian Diaspora. Transnationalism, or living in, working in, and relating to more than one country at the same time, is not a new phenomenon. Yet, in today's times, its scale and scope and its elaboration are unprecedented. Transnationalism has become a prominent subject of study academically. The field of transnational studies is quite an elaborate and established field now. At the same time, the term and concept of transnationalism are also becoming popular in non-academic circles. The field itself has also evolved since the time it got established in the 1990s, with changes that have come about due to globalization, privatization and liberalization in India. The field itself has also undergone churning and come up with revised definitions and concepts. The new Indian middle class, which is now much talked about, is very large as compared to the pre-independence and early independence years. The relationship between this new middle class, its changed values, with diasporas and with transnationalism is going to be the focus of this paper. The precise objectives of this module are to examine the concept of transnationalism in the era of globalization, to explore the many aspects and facets of transnationalism, to examine the composition, the size of the new Indian middle class and its changed values, and finally, to posit a relationship between diasporas, the new Indian middle class and transnationalism. What does transnationalism truly mean? Let us consider definitions given by some distinguished experts in the field. According to Vertovec, transnationalism describes a condition in which, despite great distances and notwithstanding the presence of international borders, certain kinds of relationships have been globally intensified and now take place paradoxically in a planet-spanning yet common, however virtual, arena of activity. According to Glick, Schiller and others, transnationalism is a process by which immigrants maintain multi-stranded social relations that link their society of origin and their settlement destinations. They also emphasize that immigrants maintain a social field that stretches across geographical and political borders. In the pre-globalization period, most Indian diasporas did maintain some kind of links with the homeland. There were a few who, because of the distance and lack of communication facilities, completely lost touch with relatives back home. They carried with them and nurtured cultural practices from home. But they were not transnationals in that they were completely settled in their destination countries. But there were others, like Gujarati business communities of the same period, who kept business, trade and marital links with not just their home state, but even with the villages they came from. These communities did display elements of transnationalism, but the scale, scope and implications of present-day transnationalism are different. This is due to a number of factors that enable free movement of capital, goods, people and ideas. People are no longer just crossing boundaries and setting up a new life. Rather, they are making to and fro trips between homeland and hostland and maintaining concrete networks of linkages which arise from this back and forth migration. An older example, and in many ways the beginning of corporate transnationalism, are the MNCs. Companies, due to the impetus of globalization, have developed and grown not only within their own nation states but across different nation states. These companies have maintained solid links with their home, that is headquarters, including office culture, management style, etc. The TV series Outsourced is a rather humorous take on the cultural and social differences and the social situations that arise from the interactions among the people who work in an MNC. Religious organizations have become transnational in a big way. Many originating in India have chapters abroad as well. These branches allow for migrants to remain in touch with the culture and religion of their home country. These institutions help transmigrants to maintain ties to their homeland and act as a socializing agent for the second and third generation immigrants. ISKCON, or International Society for Krishna Consciousness, is a prominent example. Then there are organizations and movements centered around spiritual gurus like Satya Sai Baba, Amritanandamayi, Shri Shri Ravi Shankar. These do not function only within the arena of the spiritual, but are also more in touch with the rather earthly side of life and have set up educational institutions and charity foundations in their host countries as well as in India. Development projects constitute another well-developed transnational field. People are realizing that practical functioning and impactful solutions to social problems are available by pooling resources, hiring consultants, adopting programs from various organizations across nation states to set up projects, building awareness, setting up funds, etc. are ways of doing transnational development projects. The Red Cross, Gates Foundation, Teach to Lead are a few of the many foreign organizations donating to causes in India and working with people in the Indian social sector to bring about positive change. While all these are obvious examples, two other definite markers of transnationalism are the returning investments from the diaspora and the marked increase in people traveling abroad. Brain drain has been a concern among the intelligentsia of the country for years. Comforting trend in recent years is that many migrants are returning to India with a broader skill base and technical know-how, or they are investing in businesses in the country. These investments are coming in via social linkages from among family members, friends and colleagues. Family businesses are expanding abroad or partnering with companies abroad. Educational institutes are getting funding from high-placed alumni and even hosting lectures by them. There is a definite return of social and economic capital to the homeland. A significant marker of vigorous transnationalism are the trends in marriage. No longer are marriages limited within national borders. Matchmaking aunts, grandparents and bureaus are providing eligible matches from across the 7 seas. An understanding of these developments will help get clarity on the current avatar of transnationalism. But first, let us look briefly at some of the debates and developments in the field of transnational studies. One debate is about whether the phenomenon of transnationalism needs a separate field of study and approach or can be accommodated within migration and diaspora studies or within globalization studies. One powerful view is that contemporary transnationalism creates an absolutely new pattern of behavior and new circumstances among the new migrant groups and therefore definitely needs a new approach. Globalization studies, however, question the utility of transnationalism as a separate field. Globalization is seen as a facilitator for transnational lifestyle and has helped transmigration develop. Another debate has to do with existing definitions encompassing too many things. Fresh conceptualizations of terms like translocalism, transnationalism and transmigration have occurred. As Nina Glick Schiller and others argue, this working and reworking of concepts and terms is needed to understand matters in other disciplines like migration and diaspora studies as well. Another strand of discussion has been centered around the idea of transnationalism as a process, especially developed through the analysis of globalization and its effect on migration. Therefore, the question arises, can the two concepts be isolated from one another? Isn't transnationalism just another name for globalization? There are various different takes on this debate. Alejandro Portes' approach is that transnationalism is not so much a new perspective as much as a rather novel phenomenon resulting from the modality and intensification of the process of improvement in communication and transportation. This in itself is intrinsically driven by technological development. Another approach by Smith and Guarizino speaks about there being two types of transnationalism, one from above and one from below. The first is very close to globalization and concentrates on macroeconomic processes, not anchored in any specific territories. Transnationalism from below, on the other hand, concentrates on the relationships of people across two or more different nation states. On the other side of the debate, for some like Sclair, Glick, Schiller and Furon, globalization and transnationalism are overlapping. However, the latter is more limited in scope than the former. This limitation arises from the transnational process being anchored, that is affected by the various geographical territories to which it is linked, which global processes are not. Finally, there has been a discernible change in transnational studies in recent decades, from a focus on multinational corporations to diasporas and migrant populations. In India, the phenomenon of transnationalism has brought about discernible changes in the lifestyles and aspirations of the middle class during a period when the middle class itself has expanded tremendously and become heterogeneous. The old Indian middle class was a product of British rule and the new occupations and professions it created. The traditional feudal agrarian structure had disintegrated, and the upper castes, with their tradition of learning and ruling, became urbanized and professionalized. As Mishra points out, this group formed the middle class, which played a key leadership role in the social reform and national movements. It continued for some decades after independence and was characterized by values of austerity, simplicity, emphasis on learning and education. Indian society, economy and polity underwent radical changes from the 1970s onwards, and more particularly from the 1990s, when liberalization, privatization and globalization became established and operationalized. Among the important developments was an expansion of the middle class with a change in composition as well as guiding values. Many scholars such as Satish Deshpande and Pranab Bardhan have pointed out that the middle class is a force to be reckoned with. Their possession of human and cultural capital allows them to strongly impact the state and its policies. In turn, the policies are furthering the reach and impact of the middle class while simultaneously bringing about various changes in the middle class. How big is the Indian middle class? There is a debate on the strength of the new middle class and consequently on who falls within this grouping. Various definitions, scales which utilize parameters ranging from per capita income to expenditure and saving trends have been used to define this group. The use of income as a defining criterion, often exclusively, has been the dominant economic approach to the Indian middle class. According to the National Council of Applied Economic Research, the country's middle class has grown considerably in the past 25 years, more than tripling to reach 300 million. According to a combined NCAER-CMCR 2010 report, the Indian middle class, calculated in households, numbered 10.7 million in 2001-2002, which increased to 28.4 million in the year 2009-2010. A picture of the composition of the middle class can be seen in E. Sridharan's categorization. He uses Market Information Survey of Households data, MISH, which looks at the middle classes as intermediate income groups in non-manual occupations situated between a tiny rich upper class and a majority of low income and manual occupation groups. According to the MISH, there are 5 income groups based on annual income as reported by the head of the household. High, above rupees 1,40,000. Upper middle, rupees 1,05,000 to rupees 1,40,000. Middle, rupees 70,001 to rupees 1,05,000. Lower middle, rupees 35,001 to rupees 70,000. Lower, up to rupees 35,000. The top 3 income groups together are called the broadest middle class. Data shows that both in rural areas and urban areas, in the top 3 income categories, there has been a marked increase in number of households from the year 1990 to 1999. However, there has been a decline in the number of households in the 2 lower income categories. The broadest middle class accounted only for 26% of the population in 1998-99, while the elite accounted for 6% of the population in the same year. Of the 26% broadest middle class, salary earners were 35%, self-employed were 24%, cultivators, the emerging agricultural middle class in the rural areas, constituted a further 26%. That the new Indian middle class has become consumption oriented is now a well established fact. These are visible in the kind of discretionary spending on non-essential goods like branded clothes and gadgets, packaged foods and credit cards, to give just a few examples. India's shift to a consumer society will only accelerate as more people become connected and this connectivity has started happening. A McKinsey study done in 2010 also talks about different groups: seekers earning annually between 2 lakh and 5 lakh rupees, and strivers with incomes between 5 lakh and 10 lakh rupees, who will become India's huge new middle class. Strivers, the upper end of the middle class, tend to be senior government officials, managers of large business, professionals and rich farmers. This is the group that has transnational linkages. To put it in a nutshell, the new middle class is not only much larger than the old middle class, but it is much more heterogeneous, including a range of social groups and communities and lower castes and previously marginalized groups. One can say that among the many categories, only the relatively wealthy categories are able to leverage the advantages of transnational networks. To gauge the effect of transnationalism and transmigration on this section of the Indian middle class, it needs to be evaluated across various domains: the economic domain, political domain, the social domain, cultural and religious domain. Gauging the economic impact, remittances from abroad reflect the strength and spread of transnational financial network. Both professional and semi-skilled and unskilled labor remit money. According to the World Bank Report 2010, India is the largest recipient of international remittances in the world. In terms of percentage of GDP, it equals about 3% in 2003, with the sharpest increase in transfers during the period 1991-97. This trend has only gone on to sharply increase. The RBI report of 2006 suggests that 35% of international remittances flow originated in the Middle Eastern region, 35% in North America, 20% in Europe and 10% in other countries. Remittances not only benefit individual families but also enable regional development in certain districts and states where migration has been high, like Kerala, Punjab, Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Transnationalism, by enabling chain migration and employment, enhances the flow and impact of remittances. The logic of the transnational economy is to recruit qualified personnel irrespective of location, race and gender. Thus, with the increasing presence of middle class women in the skilled professional workforce, they enter into the transnational economy, and the enhanced household income helps in wealth generation and social mobility of the family. Government of India is encouraging financial flows from immigrants by providing information on and incentivizing investments. It is also changing laws around taxation. It has enacted the Foreign Exchange Management Act in 2000, which facilitates the transfer of foreign currency, especially when it is directed towards the setting up of new businesses locally. The status of students was also changed to that of non-residents, allowing them to receive up to $1 million a year from relatives in India. Specific rules have also been applied to the taxation of remittances such that overseas Indians can receive 100% tax reduction on exports from special economic zones. Since 2006, India has signed a number of bilateral agreements to avoid double taxation of individuals opening enterprises or moving between India and other countries. There is no longer just a one-way movement, since Indian professionals abroad are returning to work in India as well as bringing with them the foreign expertise, knowledge and more networking links for India to avail of. Some return for good, starting new enterprises in India, leveraging their transnational networks. Others come for an assignment or a posting. Either way, they manage to set themselves up, drawing foreign salaries or income from abroad with the specific conveniences of lifestyles available in India. This also draws middle-class Indians residing in India to partake of the transnational nexus. Return migration is considered a triple win. The receiving country is able to fill up its labor shortages, while the migrant is able to earn well and upgrade skills while maintaining links with the homeland as well. Return migration brings back managerial and technical know-how, which stimulates economic growth in the homeland. This in turn attracts more migrants to return. This creates a cycle which benefits the sending country in the long run with the return of high-skilled migrants. Politically, the phenomenon of transnationalism has exposed middle-class Indians to the workings of democracy and the market elsewhere in the world and made them aware of what they need and want for themselves. This has translated into support for whom they feel are best suited to giving it to them. This political awareness and willingness to engage with electoral politics is a major change in the middle class, which is now treated as a vote bank. Since the political and industrial class are very deeply linked in India, The upper middle class and their transnational linkages are a major source of funding and support for the various political figures and their parties. The Indian middle class looks towards the national government to ensure good relations with other countries. The Indian middle class looks towards the national government to ensure good relations with other countries and to ensure the safety of their families and financial stakes abroad. As a result, the politically inclined new Indian middle class, with its global networks and its international expectations, has major political clout within the politics of the country. Socially, India is affected in a big way as a consequence of those who migrate to foreign lands as well as those who come back, and the transnational networks they are able to access. Factors such as social status, marriage alliances, gender roles, and public-private expression are all changing as a result of these global linkages. The practice of maintaining links with family and close relatives across national borders is not only creating a social link, it is becoming incorporated within the identity of those left behind. They have a son, daughter, sister, brother abroad is a piece of information very easily offered when these people are spoken of as an indicator of their social and economic status. Older generations are becoming technologically savvy in order to stay in touch with their children and grandchildren. In the case of marriage and migration abroad, the new communication channels help greatly to expand marital networks, keeping the rule of endogamy intact. One only has to scan the matrimonial columns of prominent newspapers to see a plethora of ads asking for or offering an NRI or green card holding spouse. However, there was a noticeable decline in demand for NRI males among parents in India trying to arrange marriages of daughters in the last decade. The financial downturn in the West and the growth of the upper middle class in India with high disposable incomes is leading to a preference for seeking partners from within India itself. Marriage with NRIs has in itself over many years brought up many issues of deception and abandonment of brides to light, forcing measures for safeguarding women's rights. In the earlier era, issues such as these were never even considered. In the Indian diaspora, it has become very common for grandparents to visit for long periods of time to help with childbirth and child care. This is cost effective, ensures that child rearing is close to the Indian style, and allows both the husband and wife to pursue their careers. Such senior citizens of the Indian middle class can be seen regularly commuting between their home in India and the children's home abroad, usually in the summer months, and form an interesting example of the transnational links of the new Indian middle class. Cultural and religious activities of the middle class have not changed significantly. The population has accommodated globalization within the cultural and religious norms. The middle class still saves, but also invests and spends, but spending patterns have changed to more money on education, healthcare, and various technologies of communication. A steady job is still socially desirable, yet not considered as crucial as it was just a few years ago. Gender relations are also noticeably changing, with women working out of the home but still being expected to handle the major share of household duties. Men are also increasingly being seen in otherwise female domains such as the study of the arts and humanities, as well as involving themselves more in child rearing and other household responsibilities. Overall, in the new middle class, there is greater knowledge and to an extent tolerance of the differences that arise through transmigration. Religion is becoming globalized in every sense of the word. Transnational links have ensured that religious organizations are found in every corner of the world. The middle class has availed itself of this phenomenon very quickly. Organized religious agencies are now catering to new demands of simpler rituals, less dogmatic, using more accessible materials. Religious books are available in English, sermons on digital formats such as CDs and downloads with online links, and even a paraphernalia directed at the consumerist middle class. In fact, the youth are the target audience with funky t-shirts, trips to religious places and other activities which may direct their attention to the religious doctrine. Religion is equally a commodity for sale as well as a spiritual balm for those seeking inner peace. One can look at various religious institutions as different companies looking for patronage, and they provide different amenities for those who are members of the club. All of this needs monetary inflow, and the transnational networks that are maintained by various cultural, linguistic and ethnic groups are definitely a source for this change. To conclude, transnationalism and transnational networks have pervaded our lives substantially no matter in which corner of the globe we live. Transnational networks have created links between diasporas and the middle class in India, giving rise to the idea of the global Indian who is unfettered by geographical location. Of course, the benefits of this linkage is reaped more by certain sectors of the middle class who have knowledge, skills and qualifications to use the opportunities to build for themselves a better life with international connections. For those who are in rural areas and in the lower middle class, there is certainly an improvement in the quality of life, but their ability to harness the contacts and the linkages internationally are more limited. In this new dispensation, the upper middle class in India are considered to be the movers and shakers of the economy and are wooed by advertisers and by party politicians for electoral advantage.